It didn't hit like a punch. It hit like a switch flipping. 1 second I was standing in my workshop, wiping grease off my hands after fixing the damn dryer she forgot she overstuffed again, and the next, I was staring at my phone like it had personally insulted my intelligence. A little blue bubble. I'll contact through my lawyer from now on. And just in case the words didn't drip enough arrogance, she added a smug wave emoji. You know the one, tiny hand, pink palm, like she was sending me off to war with a juice box and a pat on the head. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds, blinking. The smell of burnt lint from the dryer clung to my jacket. The house I paid for, hummed around me. Fridge running, furnace kicking in, Alexa politely reminding no one to water the plants. Her plants. I smiled. Wide. Wider than I had in months. Maybe years. Not the kind of smile you share with company. The kind you reserve for when something inside you quietly and irrevocably breaks, and the part that cared rolls over and dies without so much as a funeral. Sure, I muttered. Not, please let's talk. Not, you'll regret this. Just sure. I tapped the contact card she'd attached. Some fresh-faced idiot from a downtown firm that probably charged $400 an hour to send passive-aggressive emails about who forgot to refill the burrito. Fine. She wanted to escalate? I'd respond, with all the courtesy of a man with nothing left to lose and everything left to shut off. I tossed the rag onto the workbench and walked upstairs. Past the photos on the walls, photos she insisted we frame, photos where my smile never quite reached my eyes once I looked close enough. Past the bookshelf she filled with self-actualization books she never actually read. Past the guest bedroom she had slowly started treating like a second closet, stashing overnight bags she thought I hadn't noticed. Into the office. My domain. No crystals. No vision boards. Just a battered desk, a humming desktop tower, and a spreadsheet I updated every quarter. Accounts, assets, liabilities. Boring stuff. Stuff she never bothered to understand, because understanding it would mean understanding just how fragile her new independence really was. I sat down, cracked my knuckles, and double-clicked the file. First tab, credit cards. Every one of them, my name. Some authorized users, sure, but primary? Darren Harlow, not Lori. Second tab, utilities. Electric, gas, water, Wi-Fi, streaming services, even the bloody thermostat app, all linked to one account. Mine. Third tab, vehicles. Her car lease? Through my employer's benefit program. Insurance? My group policy. Fourth tab, healthcare. She was an add-on. A dependent. Hadn't contributed a dime toward premiums since she quit her last too stressful job 5 years ago. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to drive across town waving evidence. I just needed to click. One by one, my fingers started moving. Freeze card. Pause subscription. Disable autopay. Suspend insurance. Each click a quiet funeral for the life she thought she could keep while cutting me out like an expired coupon. Alexa's voice floated up the stairs. Reminder, pay water bill. I laughed. Actually laughed. Not loud. Not manic. Just cold. Because Lori thought sending that text made her powerful. But all it really did was hand me the perfect excuse to unplug her world at the roots. And the best part? She'd asked for it in writing. I didn't have to wonder where she was. Hell, I didn't even have to dig. She practically breadcrumbed the entire affair right into my lap like she was daring me to connect the dots. The sudden work, emergencies at 9:30 p.m. The gas receipts tucked into the console of her car, gas stations nowhere near her office, but conveniently close to the Marriott off exit 14. The hotel charges that showed up on the statement of the card I paid off every month, the one she thought I never checked because you're too tired after work. Yeah, Lori, I was tired. Just not the way you thought. The late-night texts weren't even the worst part. She wasn't clever enough to delete them properly. Half of Shane's side of the conversation would still pop up in the notification preview when her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Can't wait to see you again, smiling face with horns, sent while she was upstairs pretending to meditate. I could have played detective. Confronted her. Screamed. Sobbed. Waved the evidence around like a demented magician pulling handkerchiefs from a hat. But that would have given her exactly what she wanted. A messy, emotional excuse to paint herself as the wounded party. Nah, I was smarter than that. Smarter than her. Smarter than Shane, who, from what I gathered from his public LinkedIn profile, was the kind of guy who thought being a regional sales lead for low-end tech support software made him an entrepreneur. The best part? I didn't have to prove a damn thing in court. Because thanks to that smug little all-contact through my lawyer stunt, Lori had just made it abundantly clear that we were no longer a team. And that meant every account that said Darren Harlow, primary account holder, was mine to manage, close, or suspend without so much as a courtesy text. Every bill that came addressed to me was now a bill I could decide whether or not to pay. Every comfort she enjoyed, from her Hulu subscription to her climate-controlled car seat, was powered by the man she just told to go through proper channels. So I opened more than a spreadsheet. I opened a switchboard, a grid of lines she thought she could walk away from without consequences. And while she was busy swapping flirtatious DMs with a mid-tier nobody, I was sitting at Command Central, looking at the entire infrastructure of her comfortable little rebellion: bank accounts, utilities, car insurance, cell phones, Netflix passwords, and realizing she wasn't powerful. She was plugged in to me. And now, click by click, I could unplug her. Not with shouting, not with accusations, just with the same cold efficiency she thought she had the monopoly on. She thought cutting off communication would silence me. All she really did was open the gates for the quietest, cleanest demolition job she'd never see coming. And I wasn't even mad about it. I was liberated. It's funny how fast your hands move when your heart finally gives up pretending it's still attached. I opened the spreadsheet again, that boring old beast I'd updated out of habit every quarter. The same one Lori had rolled her eyes at every time I stayed up balancing numbers instead of binge-watching garbage TV with her. "Relax for once," she used to say, dragging me toward the couch. "You're always so uptight about money." Yeah, turns out being uptight about money was about to make this next part surgical. First tab, credit cards. 5 cards. 2 major ones, 3 store accounts. Furniture, electronics, department store junk she thought made her self-care aesthetic look effortless. All primary under me. Authorized user access? Click. Freeze. Done. If she tried to tap her shiny little platinum card at Target today, she'd get a decline message faster than Shane could type you up after 2 beers. Second tab, utilities. Water, electric, gas, Wi-Fi, home security, all on auto pay from my bank. I opened the account management portals, every single one, and switched the payment method to manual. Then, I let the next due dates roll toward oblivion. They wouldn't cut off overnight. No, utilities are polite like that. But within 72 hours? Lights out, sweetheart. Third tab, streaming, phone lines, subscriptions. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, Disney+, HBO Max. Not one service in her name. I started mass canceling them like I was launching a Black Friday sale on her dignity. The cell phones? Family plan, sure. Except the primary holder, hi, that's me, controlled the fate of every line. 2 clicks and her phone was pending disconnection. Fourth tab, vehicles. Her precious little lease. A candy red Audi she loved to flaunt when she drove to her yoga brunches and networking mixers. It sat snugly under the fleet benefits I earned after 20 years of loyal contracting. Insurance? Mine. And with one request through my employee portal, I flagged it. Pending termination due to separation proceedings. Translation: if insurance lapses, leaseholder can repossess the vehicle. Fifth tab, healthcare. Oh, Lori, you thought you'd just float through on my premium policy forever? Sweetheart, no. I went into the HR portal, navigated the Life Changes section, and clicked Separation, Immediate Dependent Removal. No more therapy bills, urgent care visits, or spa discount codes on my dime. Every single thing. The Wi-Fi she streamed her morning podcasts on. The thermostat she adjusted from her phone app. The grocery store discount she scanned on her loyalty app. The very car she parked sideways in our driveway like a trophy. All of it ran through me. My fingers moved fast, methodical. No rage. No hesitation. Just a cold satisfaction blooming in my chest like the first sip of bourbon after a brutal winter day. It wasn't revenge. It was accounting. Reckoning. And if she wanted distance? Oh, honey. She was about to get left on an island. No heat, no phone, no ride, no backup plan, because every little luxury she took for granted wasn't an entitlement. It was a connection, one she thought she could sever with a lawyer's name and a waving emoji. But all she really did was hand me the scissors. And now? Snip. The email landed at exactly 10:12 a.m., like they thought sending it before lunch would somehow make it more intimidating. Subject: immediate action requested regarding financial accounts. From Jenna L. Fry, Associate Attorney, Sterling and Knox. It was wrapped in all the usual fluff. Per our client's request, in the spirit of good faith, please refrain from accessing or altering joint financial structures until equitable division is achieved. Joint financial structures. Equitable division. They tossed around those words like confetti at a funeral they hadn't realized was already over. I leaned back in my chair, sipping lukewarm coffee, rereading it twice just to savor the stupidity. Joint financial structures. Cute. I clicked reply and typed exactly one sentence. There are no joint accounts. Everything is mine. No caps lock. No exclamation points. No long paragraphs pleading for fairness or reminding them about Shane and his motel loyalty points. Then, like a chef plating the final course of a last meal, I attached every shred of documentation. Screenshots of utility accounts all in my name. Copies of credit card statements, mine. Proof of car lease registration, mine. Insurance policies, mine. Streaming services, cell plan, thermostat account logins, mine, mine, mine. Each attachment was its own little death knell. Each file another coffin nail for Lori's lawyer to hammer down while trying not to sweat through their Banana Republic blazer. I clicked send. No delay. No second guessing. And then, silence. No rapid-fire rebuttal. No indignant follow-up. No, we respectfully disagree, or this is unacceptable. Just nothing. Which told me everything. Because her lawyer, who probably strutted into their conference room with a whiteboard titled, How We Destroy Darren Harlow, had just realized that their client wasn't standing on solid ground. She was wading through quicksand, and she hadn't even packed a rope. I pictured the moment in their office, Jenna L. Fry scrolling through the attachments, feeling her mouth go dry, maybe even rubbing her temples, trying to figure out how to explain to Lori, Princess cut me off because I'm too young to settle, that she hadn't married a fool. She'd married a man who planned for everything. Even this. Especially this. The whole dynamic shifted in a heartbeat. No longer was I the desperate husband trying to cling to a crumbling marriage. No, I was the bank, the landlord, the utility company, the gatekeeper, the man who controlled every faucet, every outlet, every cell signal she needed to live the shiny, independent life she thought was just waiting for her once she hit send on that stupid text. I didn't even bother watching the read receipt pop up. I closed my laptop, stood up, stretched like a man at the end of a long, productive day. Outside, the autumn air was crisp. Inside, the heat hummed contentedly through the vents. My vents. I poured another cup of coffee, slower this time, savoring it, because the first real battle was already over, and the other side didn't even know they'd already surrendered. She came back on a Tuesday, not to talk, not to apologize, just to grab a coat, maybe a few toiletries, maybe to peacock around her house and reassure herself she was still in control, that the lawyer's text somehow declared squatters' rights over a life she hadn't earned in a decade. She parked crooked in the driveway, of course she did, and walked in like she still had jurisdiction. The thermostat chirped when she tapped it. Then nothing. No warmth. No familiar hum of the ducts kicking in. She pressed it again. Held it. Shook it. System offline. That little screen, once glowing with cozy, catered convenience, now stared back at her like an unplugged tombstone. She went to check the Wi-Fi, because obviously the smart thermostat needed connection, right? No network found. She blinked. Reset the router. Waited. Still nothing. Her phone buzzed. It wasn't an email from Jenna the attorney. It was a push notification from her streaming app. Unable to connect to your account. Please verify your subscription. Then, like divine choreography, her stomach growled. She grabbed her coat, muttered something bitter under her breath, and stormed out. 10 minutes later, she was at the checkout line at the organic grocery store she swore she couldn't live without. She tried the card, my card. Declined. She tried it again. Declined. She smiled at the cashier like it was some silly mistake. Pulled out a backup. The Nordstrom Visa I hadn't remembered she even kept. Declined. The cashier tilted her head. Do you have another method of payment? Lori opened her banking app. Every account was locked. Every single one. She didn't panic yet. She did what any independent, self-actualized woman in her situation would do. She called Shane, and Shane offered to Venmo her $80. She needed $800 just to cover the overdue car insurance, the food, and maybe some mobile data before that got cut too. He said, "Babe, I've got rent this week. I thought you said your guy had money." She hung up before he finished the sentence. That's when she texted me. "What the hell are you doing? No, hey. No, can we talk?" Just pure entitlement, like I was some service provider she could scream at because her emotional HVAC unit had a malfunction. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even look at the message more than once. I just typed, "All contact through your lawyer." Remember? Sent. That was it. No sarcasm. No venom. No lecture. Just her own words served back cold and lifeless. Like the house she'd returned to. I stood in my new apartment, barefoot on warm hardwood, sipping black coffee I brewed on a schedule she never knew existed. The heat was perfect. The Wi-Fi was strong. My life, calm. Because the wires she tried to cut were never hers. She just forgot who paid the electric bill that powered her rebellion. She probably thought the heat going out was some glitch. A bill missed by accident. A momentary hiccup in the finely tuned machine that had always hummed along in the background while she played Socialite on top. But the truth? The machine was me. And now that I'd pulled the plug, the unraveling had only begun. The next morning, before the sun had fully burned through the frost on the windshield of her Audi, the tow truck arrived. I'd already made the call to the leaseholder. Flagged the policy as inactive due to loss of insurance coverage. Her name wasn't on the contract. Mine was. And without active insurance, per the terms of the lease, the vehicle was no longer legally in her possession. The dealership didn't blink. They dispatched a truck immediately. The guy loaded it up while Lori was still inside, probably boiling water on the stove because the electric kettle didn't work without power. I imagine her expression as she ran outside in those ridiculous Ugg boots, half-zipped coat, phone in hand, only to watch the car she used to brag about on Instagram get winched up like evidence at a crime scene. She tried to call me. Her phone lit up, then displayed a cheerful little message. Service unavailable. Contact your provider. Well, I was the provider, and I wasn't taking calls. She stormed back inside, fuming, trying to connect to Wi-Fi so she could FaceTime Jenna or maybe Shane, still believing she had options. But the router was down, and the streaming apps? Blocked. Each login attempt met with the same passive-aggressive screen. No account found. Would you like to start a free trial? She clicked reset password. It went to my email. Even the thermostat, yes, the same one she once programmed to sunrise meditation mode at 6:15 every morning, now sat locked behind an account she couldn't access. No password recovery. No tech support hotline. No fix. She'd always mocked how I labeled folders on my desktop. How I had spreadsheets titled Q1 Financials and Appliance Warranty Expirations. No? She was living in the consequence of every tab she never clicked. Even her emails were compromised, not through hacking. No, that would be beneath me. But she'd been using our shared cable provider's bundled email address. The one tied to the internet plan I canceled. Goodbye inbox. She went to her gym, the one she swore she needed to be sane. They turned her away. The auto draft had bounced. They'd already moved her off the access list. She tried to Uber to Shane's place. No ride. Her card declined. Again. Even Shane, that loyal caveman, was now responding to her text with slower and slower replies. Eventually, he'd just stop altogether. Because let's face it, she didn't come with batteries included. The version of herself she presented to the world had always been powered by the infrastructure I built quietly, methodically, without ever demanding applause. And now that I'd taken my hand off the lever, she was just a mannequin in designer jeans, wandering around a cold, quiet house she didn't own, using a disconnected phone to scream at people who weren't listening. The lights were still off. But now, for the first time, she could feel the dark. Day 3 was when the silence started to feel expensive for them. Up until that point, I figured they'd play it tough. Hit me with buzzwords like non-compliance or temporary relief motion. I expected jargon, maybe even a summons, if Lori could scrape together enough money to fund the fantasy that this was a war she could still win. But instead, I got a voicemail. Not even from Jenna, the cocky associate who sent that first email laced with confidence and copy-paste legalese. Nope. This one came from someone else, older, slower, with a voice like overcooked oatmeal trying to sound calm under pressure. Hi, Mr. Harlow. This is Douglas Myers calling on behalf of Ms. Frey's office. I'm stepping in to assist with the mediation process. A pause. We understand there have been some disruptions, and our client is requesting, purely in the spirit of cooperation, that essential utilities be restored to the residents while we continue negotiations. Another pause. He cleared his throat. We'd like to resolve this quickly and peacefully. If you could contact us at your earliest convenience, we'd appreciate the opportunity to come to an agreement without further complications. Complications. That's what they were calling it now. No mention of the initial email threatening legal action. No more talk of equitable division. Just a polite old man asking if the lights could please come back on, sir. I played the message twice. Not because I didn't catch it the first time, but because I wanted to hear it in stereo, the subtle sound of surrender echoing out of their high-rise conference room. They had clearly expected a reaction. A fight. A guilt trip. Maybe even a breakdown. What they didn't expect was precision. They didn't expect that when Lori hit send on that lawyer text, I'd treat it like a business transaction. And they sure as hell didn't expect me to respect her wishes so literally. I opened my laptop, typed a new message. Subject, utility concerns. Body. Per your client's request, please direct all communication through my legal representative. I trust we'll resolve this professionally during mediation. Simple. Cordial. Exactly the kind of cold courtesy they now wish Lori had practiced before nuking her own house of cards. I attached the contact info for my attorney, who, unlike Jenna, had been a silent partner in this the whole time. A quiet old shark who once told me, over bourbon, that the best courtroom wins come from letting the other side panic first. I hit send, and that was it. No follow-up. No voicemail. Just a quiet ping from my inbox confirming receipt. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the late afternoon sun dipping behind the city skyline. Somewhere, in the cold, dark house she used to call hers, Lori was probably wrapped in a blanket, phone dead, teeth clenched, wondering why the man she ghosted with legal threats hadn't rushed to her rescue. But this wasn't a rescue. This was compliance. She asked for lawyers. She got them. And now they were begging me to be human again. Too late. I heard the knock before I saw her. 3 short raps against the metal frame of the workshop door, tentative, like she half expected it to open itself. I was underneath a generator housing, elbow deep in wiring grease, tightening a bolt that had been loose since before her lawyer sent that smug little declaration of war. I didn't rush. I finished the turn, set the wrench down with surgical care, and rolled out from under the unit like a man completely unbothered by ghosts in daylight. And there she was. Lori. No makeup, no filters, no faux confidence stitched into overpriced athleisure. Just cold, red-rimmed eyes, and one of my old sweatshirts she used to wear to bed back when our silence wasn't weaponized yet. Her voice cracked. You're being cruel. Not sorry. Not I shouldn't have sent that text. Not even can we talk? Just a 6-word accusation hurled from behind tear-glossed lashes, as if the pain on her face was something I had manufactured, like a feature I forgot to beta test before deploying revenge. I wiped my hands on a towel, methodically, calmly. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't move toward her. I just looked at her and said, You said you wanted distance. She blinked. You said you wanted a clean break. Nothing. You didn't want to talk. Silence. You wanted Shane. Her eyes dropped. And now you want water, power, heat. All the little things that made this house run. You want the comfort. Without the man you threw away for protein shakes and hotel quickies. I watched her throat move like she was trying to swallow the shame, but it wouldn't go down. She hadn't expected this version of me. The man who could speak truth without trembling. who didn't need to shout because he already won. She looked around the shop like it might offer her some alternative script, some backup plan. Saw the rows of labeled bins, the workbench I built with my father's hands. She was standing in the cathedral of everything she took for granted, and now realized she never understood. "This is where you disappear to," she whispered. "This is where I build, Lori." I picked up the wrench again, held it, looked her dead in the eye. "You don't have to be here." That did it. She turned, slow, shoulders folding inward like collapsing scaffolding. She walked back toward her car, not the Audi, of course. That was already gone. She'd Ubered here, or maybe begged a friend, or Shane. I didn't watch her leave. I just listened to the crunch of gravel under her shoes and the hollow sound of silence returning. No apology, no grand gesture. Just a woman who finally realized the furnace wasn't broken. She was. And the warmth she craved wasn't from the heater. It was from the man who stopped pretending to be her safety net. I got back under the generator. Turned the bolt 2 more clicks. Tight. Perfect. They waited until Friday, like stalling until the end of the week would soften the pitch. Like time had made me reasonable or desperate. They didn't realize I wasn't the one bleeding resources every hour this dragged on. The offer came through my lawyer in a glossy PDF, formatted like they'd already imagined how proud Lori would be reading it out loud to her friends at brunch. Proposal for mediation resolution. 50-50 split of assets. Modest alimony for a period of 3 years. Lori retains primary residence. Darren retains business assets and vehicle. It even had a line about maintaining amicable postmarital conditions. I laughed so hard my lawyer choked on his coffee. "They actually think she's walking away with the house?" I asked, already opening a new folder on my desktop. "Oh," I said, "they want to negotiate? Then let's start with the facts." I crafted my response with the same care I used to build our home's foundation, the same one Lori now believed she could redecorate in court filings. My counteroffer? Simple. I keep the house. It's in my name, purchased before the marriage, paid off with earnings from a career she never supported. No alimony. She's capable of work. Choosing not to isn't a disability. She gets the car, if she settles the balance in full before title transfer. Payments resume when she remembers how employment works. Then, with the grace of a man who doesn't bluff, I attached 6 months of hotel receipts. Itemized cell phone records showing late-night calls to Shane, a contact saved under Zumba Coach. GPS pings from her phone log through our joint security app. A time-stamped photo of her kissing Shane in the parking garage beneath her office. All cataloged. All documented. All admissible. My lawyer clicked send with a grin. "How long do you think until they fold?" "Give it an hour," I said. It took 43 minutes. At 4:12 p.m., a new email popped in. From Jenna. No subject line. One sentence. "We are withdrawing the proposed terms and will confer with our client regarding next steps." Translation? Lori saw the house of cards teetering. And for the first time, she realized I wasn't trying to win. I'd already won. Quietly. Legally. Irrevocably. The court wouldn't see a bitter husband. They'd see a man methodically protecting his assets from a self-inflicted collapse. She threw the first stone. I built a castle with the rubble. And now she was stuck outside, asking if she could at least keep the driveway. It was inevitable. You could practically set a timer on a guy like Shane. All abs and ambition, no spine. He was fun when the wine was chilled, the lights were low, and someone else was paying for the scented candles. But when the bills started arriving with her name on them, and no Darren in the fine print, Shane's loyalty evaporated faster than her car insurance. From what I gathered, thanks to a couple of mutual acquaintances who still sent me screenshots out of sheer pettiness, it started with a "Hey, babe," just until my next paycheck. Then, "My accounts are frozen too, weird, right?" Followed by complete radio silence. When she finally tried to call him, it went straight to voicemail. She texted, "Read." No reply. Then, blocked. Her lawyer stopped responding days ago. Shane ghosted her. And suddenly, Lori found herself, just as she had wished, completely alone. She reached out to a friend of ours. Technically her friend, though let's be honest, most of them liked me better once the real Lori showed up in the daylight. That friend, with all the grace of a woman who knew she was being pulled into a soap opera, forwarded me a voice memo Lori had sent her. He said he thought I had money, that I was rich, that I had the house. I never said that. I just didn't correct him. Didn't correct him. Of course she didn't. She let him think I was some boring, checked-out husband who sat on a recliner while she quietly plotted a glittery exit. That the cars, the house, the perfectly chilled rose in the wine fridge were all her choices, her domain. But Shane wasn't an idiot. Well, he wasn't smart either. He was just the kind of guy who could spot a sinking ship and jump before it fully tipped. And when her credit cards started bouncing, when she had to borrow money to pay off the minimum balance just to buy a plane ticket to a friend's wedding in Napa, that's when the illusion cracked. He told mutual friends, some of whom were mine, some hers, most now just entertained. She told me she was rich. Turns out she was just married to someone who was brutal, efficient, accurate. The truth of it stung worse than anything I could have said, because it didn't come from me. It came from the man she traded me for, the one who smiled in gym mirrors and called himself a consultant, but couldn't float her a week of utilities when the heat went out. And now, she was the woman sleeping in a cold house she didn't own, on a mattress she didn't pay for, eating takeout from the one card that hadn't been shut down yet. While I was finishing bourbon number 2, in a warm, quiet place I bought with the paycheck she once called too steady. She'd played the wrong game with the wrong man, and now she'd been left holding her own empty hand. She walked into that courtroom trying to look collected, but I could see the panic stitched into every thread of the outfit she'd borrowed. Not her usual designer coat, not the polished heels, just a too-tight blazer that used to belong to her sister when I recognized from a family funeral 5 years ago, and slacks that bunched at the ankles like defeat. No ring, no Shane. She sat across from me, eyes forward, jaw clenched like she thought it made her look unbothered. But I noticed her thumb twitching over her palm like she wanted to be holding a phone that no longer worked. My attorney didn't speak much. He didn't need to, because the documents did all the shouting. Bank records, utility bills, account ownership, insurance plans, property deeds, phone logs, hotel receipts. We presented it all with the calm efficiency of an accountant tallying receipts after a clearance sale. The judge didn't rush. He took his time. First, he asked her about employment. She said she was in between projects. He asked when she last filed an income tax return with personal earnings. She froze, blinked, then muttered, 2016. His pen stopped moving. Then he asked about living expenses, how she paid for groceries, gas, utilities. She started to explain, stumbled, then said she had support from friends. The courtroom didn't laugh, but the silence that followed made it worse. When it came time for her lawyer to make a plea for alimony and asset division, he tried. God, he really tried. Cited emotional labor, time invested in the marriage, contribution to household stability. The judge skimmed the counterclaim, saw the notarized proof that every major asset, house, vehicles, accounts, was acquired before marriage or under my sole name. Then he paused at the file folder labeled Infidelity Timeline, which my lawyer slid across the bench with the quiet confidence of a man who'd already seen the end of the movie. There were photos. There were timestamps. There were even screenshots of Lori bragging to friends about finally being free of a man who couldn't match her energy. Yeah, the court loved that one. The ruling wasn't long. Mr. Harlow retains all primary assets. No alimony awarded. Vehicle returned to leaseholder. Ms. Harlow granted a modest separation settlement of $5,000 payable in 2 installments. That was it. No fireworks. No grand monologue. Just numbers. Orders. Finality. Lori didn't cry. She just stared down at the table like the wood grain would somehow split open and swallow her before she had to walk out of that room with nothing. And then, just before the clerk asked us to rise, her lawyer leaned toward her and whispered, just loud enough for me to catch. I told you not to send that text. The emoji wave. That stupid little message that was supposed to be her mic drop. It ended up being her anchor. She stood, knees stiff, and didn't look back as she left the room. Just adjusted her sister's borrowed blazer and walked out like a job applicant who already knew she wouldn't be getting a call back. Me? I nodded to the judge, shook my lawyer's hand, and walked into the hallway with the quiet, unshakable clarity of a man who survived the storm without ever raising his voice. She wanted a war. She got a reckoning. It was one of those perfect winter evenings, crisp air outside, wood and wire calm inside. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but earned. The house, my house, hummed quietly, radiators doing their job, Spotify playing a slow jazz track I didn't have to justify to anyone. No interruptions. No sighs from across the couch. No passive-aggressive swipes disguised as conversation. Just me. And peace. I tossed my keys into the tray by the door, kicked off my boots, and hung up my coat on the same hook that used to hold Lori's. That hook had been empty for months now. She took everything else with her when she left, except for the dignity, apparently. The mail was sitting on the console table. I flipped through it absently. Utility statements, paid, a flyer for a local roofing service, recycled, and then one envelope. White. Standard. Typed. Return address. Sterling and Knox LLP. The lawyer's office. No anticipation. No dread. Just curiosity, like opening a fortune cookie after a meal you already enjoyed. Inside was a single sheet. No official tone. No legal threats this time. Just desperation dressed in formality. Mr. Harlow. On behalf of our client, we are requesting a temporary reinstatement of phone and utility services connected to the residence previously shared. Our client is in the process of securing new accommodations and would appreciate access to basic services during this transition. She expresses regret for any previous missteps and wishes to resolve this amicably. Sincerely, Jenna L. Fry, Associate Counsel. I stared at it, not in anger, not even in disbelief, just calm recognition. She'd circled back. All that posture, all that fire, down to this. A plea to plug her back into the very life she ripped herself out of. I held the paper in my hand for a moment longer, then set it on the edge of the table. Opened my phone, drafted a reply, then stopped. I didn't owe a reply. She didn't want contact. She wanted convenience. And I'd stopped offering that the moment she weaponized my silence and thought she could use lawyers like remote controls. I deleted the draft, deleted the email, deleted her number, again, for good measure. Then I turned toward the thermostat. 3 simple taps. Heat, on. Fan, auto. Temperature, 73 degrees. Warmth spread through the house. Not for her. Not for anyone else. Just for me. Because the whole time she thought she held the switch when she wagged that smug little emoji and played Queen of Detachment, she never realized. The grid she unplugged herself from was mine. Every comfort, every password, every piece of power. She never owned any of it. She just borrowed it. And when she decided she didn't need the man, she found out, too late, she couldn't live without the current. So I sat down, took a sip of warm bourbon, and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. No texts, no lawyers, no apology that mattered. Just the sound of a house that answered only to me now. Because the wires she cut were never hers to hold.
Welcome to Shattered Trust Stories. If you're here for raw, real stories of betrayal and hard choices, hit subscribe and let us know where you're tuning in from. Let's get into it. The laughter echoed in my ears, blending with the clinking of glasses and the sweet melody of the band playing Emily and Josh's first dance song. I was standing near the edge of the reception hall, watching my daughter in her flowing white gown twirl around the dance floor. Her happiness was infectious, radiating in every smile, every graceful move. But then my eyes shifted, just for a second, to the man standing near the bar. Mark, Karen's cousin, my cousin-in-law, or at least that's all I thought he was. He was leaning against the counter, a whiskey in hand, his tie loosened like he was already over the formalities. But it wasn't his posture that caught my attention. It was the way his eyes never left Emily. He wasn't looking at her like a proud relative admiring the bride. There was something else in his gaze. Something heavy, something possessive. It froze me on the spot. I shook it off, or tried to. I told myself I was being ridiculous, paranoid, but the rest of the evening, I couldn't unsee it. The lingering glances, the way Karen seemed to avoid me whenever she was near him, the way Mark disappeared just before the father-daughter dance. It was subtle, easy to overlook in the chaos of the celebration, but it left a strange pit in my stomach. The moment should have ended there, lost in the blur of the evening. But it didn't. It stayed with me, nagging like a splinter under my skin. 3 days after the wedding, Emily dropped by our house. She was glowing, talking excitedly about their honeymoon plans, when she casually mentioned the DNA tests. "Josh got me one as a gift," she said, her smile so wide it almost erased the growing unease in me. "You should totally do one, Dad. It'd be fun to see how far back our family goes." Karen, sitting beside me on the couch, tensed for just a second. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't already been on edge. She quickly recovered, laughing lightly. "You're so obsessed with those things, Em. What's next?" "A family tree scrapbook." But her tone was off. It wasn't the playful teasing I was used to. It felt sharp, defensive. I didn't think much of it at the time. I agreed to Emily's idea, why not? It seemed harmless, fun even, and that was that, until the results arrived. It was a Sunday morning when I opened the email. Karen was out, running errands or so she said, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. The results loaded slowly, the wheel spinning as if the universe was giving me one last chance to back out. And then there it was. The page, the data, my name, Emily's name, and one glaring, impossible truth. No match. Not low percentages. Not a distant connection. Nothing. It didn't compute. My brain tried to reject it, to rationalize it as a mistake, a glitch in the system. I refreshed the page. Nothing changed. The numbers didn't lie. Emily wasn't my daughter. But then the real punch to the gut. Mark's name. His results were linked to mine as a close connection. Too close. And that's when the pieces started falling into place, one jagged shard at a time. I didn't even feel the coffee cup slip from my hand, shattering on the floor. My world was already breaking into pieces far sharper than the ceramic at my feet. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house, unable to sit still, unable to process what I just uncovered. Every thought led to a new question, and every question twisted the knife deeper. How long had this been going on? Did Karen know? Did Mark know? Did Emily know? The last one made me feel sick. My sweet, oblivious daughter. Could she have been keeping this secret from me all these years? No, that didn't make sense. But then what did? Karen came home around 6 p.m., her usual breezy self, carrying grocery bags and complaining about traffic. She didn't notice the tension in the room at first. But when I didn't respond to her small talk, she stopped unpacking and gave me a sideways glance. "You okay?" she asked, her voice cautious. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I slid my phone across the kitchen counter. The DNA results open on the screen. Her expression didn't change. Not at first, but her hands froze mid-motion. Slowly, she put the carton of eggs on the counter and reached for the phone. "What's this?" she asked, feigning ignorance. But her voice cracked, just a little. "Just read it," I said, my voice colder than I'd intended. Her eyes flicked over the screen. I watched her face as the pieces clicked together. The way her mouth twitched, the way her jaw tightened, the way her shoulders sank just slightly, as if a weight she'd been carrying for years had suddenly become too heavy. She didn't need to say anything. I already knew. "How long?" My voice was steady, but it took everything in me not to slam my fist on the counter. "How long have you been lying to me, Karen?" She didn't answer. Not right away. She set the phone down carefully, like it might explode, and turned to face me. For a moment, she almost looked relieved. "Don't do this now," she said quietly, her tone laced with warning. "Let's talk about it later when we're calmer." "Calmer?" I snapped. "You want me to be calm after finding out the man I've been calling family, your cousin, is actually my daughter's father?" Her face hardened. "Lower your voice," she hissed. "Emily could walk in at any moment. That's what you're worried about?" I laughed bitterly, running a hand through my hair. "Not the fact that you've been lying to me for over 20 years? That you let me believe Emily was mine? That you let me—" My voice broke. I couldn't even finish the sentence. "Let you what?" Karen shot back, her voice rising now. "Raise her? Love her? Be her father? Is that what you're angry about?" "I'm angry because you betrayed me," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "You betrayed us. You built this entire life with me on a lie. She didn't flinch. If anything, she squared her shoulders, meeting my gaze with a defiance I hadn't expected. "And what would you have done if you'd known?" she demanded. "If I told you 20 years ago that Emily wasn't yours, what would you have done? Left? Turned your back on her? On me?" Her words hit me like a slap. Not because they were true, but because they were calculated, designed to shift the blame, to make me feel like the villain in my own story. It was classic Karen. She always had a way of twisting things, of turning the tables until you didn't know which way was up. But this time I wasn't buying it. "You don't get to make this about me," I said, my voice low but firm. "You don't get to act like you did this for my sake. This was about you, about your choices, about your lies." Karen's lips tightened into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. But instead, she did the one thing I never expected. She smirked. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Fine. Mark was a better man than you ever were. He still is. And if I could go back, I'd do it all over again." The words hit like a sledgehammer. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, trying to comprehend how the woman I'd spent my entire adult life with could be so cold. But she wasn't done. She leaned in, her smirk widening. "And here's the best part. Emily doesn't know. She thinks you're her dad. So go ahead, tell her. Ruin her life. See what happens." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. I could feel my blood boiling, my fists clenching at my sides. But I didn't respond. Not then. I just turned and walked out of the house, her laughter following me like a dagger between my shoulders. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that the Karen I thought I knew was gone. Or maybe she'd never existed at all. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, her smirk replayed in my mind, her venomous words stabbing at my sanity. "Mark was a better man than you ever were." That sentence echoed louder than the rest, taunting me, daring me to retaliate. She had no idea who she was dealing with. By morning I had a plan, not fully formed, but the seeds were there. I wasn't about to let her or Mark walk away from this unscathed. If she thought she could humiliate me and keep my silence out of fear of hurting Emily, she was dead wrong. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the decades of lies, about the betrayal that had rippled through every corner of my life. And it was about justice. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, Tom. I'd known him for years. He handled the legal side of my business, and I trusted him to give me advice without asking too many questions. I told him I needed information on the implications of a DNA test disproving paternity, specifically regarding financial obligations. "Do you want to disown her?" Tom asked bluntly. The question hit like a slap. "No," I snapped. "Emily is still my daughter. This isn't about her." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Then what is it about?" "Just get me the information," I said, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. While Tom got to work, I started digging into Mark. I didn't want to confront him, not yet. Not until I had every piece of the puzzle. But I needed to know more about the man who'd been living a double life in plain sight. His social media accounts were a goldmine. Pictures from the wedding, captions that dripped with faux sincerity, comments from Karen that now felt like coded messages. And then I found it, a photo from 15 years ago, taken at what looked like a family barbecue. Mark was standing next to Karen, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. It wouldn't have meant anything at the time, but now it screamed at me. The caption read, "Family is everything." The rage boiled over. I grabbed my phone and called Karen. She picked up on the second ring. "What do you want?" she said, her tone sharp. "I want answers," I growled. "And you're going to give them to me." "Not this again," she sighed, but I cut her off. "When did it start?" I demanded. "How long were you and Mark sneaking around behind my back?" There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing on the other end. Finally, she said, "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "Not until I know the truth." She hesitated. Then finally, "It was one time." "Bullshit." "I'm serious," she snapped. "It was one stupid mistake. We were drunk. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I repeated, my voice rising. "It meant enough for you to lie about it for 20 years. It meant enough for you to let me raise his child while he stood there playing the doting cousin. I didn't let you do anything, she shot back. You chose to be Emily's father. And you did a damn good job. So why are you so hellbent on tearing everything apart now? Because I deserve better than lies, I said coldly. And so does Emily. The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. I stared at the phone, my blood boiling, but I didn't call her back. Let her stew in it. She thought she could control this narrative, but she was wrong. I wasn't the same man she thought she'd been manipulating all these years. The next step was harder. I had to decide how to involve Emily, or whether to involve her at all. She was innocent in this, but the truth had a way of surfacing, and I didn't want her to hear it from anyone else. Still, I couldn't drop the bombshell without proof. Not yet, so I went to see Mark. I showed up unannounced at his office. He looked surprised to see me but quickly plastered on that charming grin he always used to mask his arrogance. "Hey man," he said, standing to shake my hand. "What's up?" I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I just stood there, staring at him until the grin started to falter. "We need to talk," I said, his brow furrowed. Sure. What's this about?" "It's about Emily," I said, watching his reaction closely. His eyes flickered just for a second. It was subtle, but I caught it. "Emily?" he repeated, forcing a laugh. "What about her?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I know." The color drained from his face. Whatever he'd been expecting, it wasn't that. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly, but his voice betrayed him. "Don't play dumb, Mark," I said. "I've seen the DNA results. You're her father." For a moment he just stood there, frozen. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. "Guess the cat's out of the bag," he said, leaning back in his chair like we were discussing the weather. "So what now?" The sheer audacity of his response left me momentarily speechless. But then I realized something. He wasn't afraid. He didn't think I'd do anything. And that's when I knew how I was going to destroy him. Mark leaned back in his chair, his smirk oozing with arrogance. It was infuriating but also revealing. He didn't see me as a threat. Not yet. He thought this was over, that the revelation itself was the climax, and now we'd all just deal with the fallout. He had no idea I was only getting started. I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I mirrored his posture, leaning against the edge of his desk. My silence made him uneasy. He tapped his pen against the wood, the rhythmic clicks betraying his nerves. "You're taking this well," he said finally, his voice casual but edged with caution. "Am I?" I said, letting a hint of a smile curl at the corner of my mouth. "I guess I've had time to process." His eyes narrowed slightly. He wasn't expecting that. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, his tone almost mocking. "Are you going to tell Emily? Karen?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. That depends." "On what?" "On whether you can answer a few questions for me." Mark's confidence wavered, just for a second, but he recovered quickly. "Shoot. How long have you known?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," I said, leaning in slightly. "So let's try that again. How long have you known?" He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. I've known since she was born. Karen told me right away." The words hit like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I filed the information away, my mind racing. If he'd known all along, that meant every family gathering, every birthday, every Christmas. He'd been there, watching me raise his child, knowing the truth and saying nothing. "Why didn't you step in?" I asked, my voice hardening. Mark shrugged. "It wasn't my place. Karen made it clear she wanted you to be her father. And honestly, you were good at it. Emily loves you. Why mess with that?" His attempt at flattery only fueled my anger. "How noble of you," I said dryly. "But that's not the whole story, is it?" He frowned. "What are you talking about?" I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "This wasn't a one-time mistake, was it? You and Karen. How long were you sleeping together?" Mark's smirk faltered. He glanced away, breaking eye contact for the first time. "That's none of your business." "It became my business the second you decided to ruin my life," I said coldly. So I'll ask one last time. How long? Mark's silence was answer enough. The truth hung heavy in the air, unspoken but undeniable. It wasn't just one night. It was an affair, a long one, and they'd both kept it hidden for years, weaving their lies into the fabric of my life. Unbelievable, I muttered, pushing off the desk and pacing the room. My hands were shaking, but I clenched them into fists, forcing myself to stay in control. Losing my temper wouldn't help. Not yet. Look, Mark said, standing up and raising his hands defensively. I get that you're angry, but what's done is done. Emily doesn't need to know about this. It'll only hurt her. Don't pretend this is about Emily, I snapped. This is about you. You're scared she'll hate you as much as I do. Mark's face darkened. Watch it, he warned, his tone low. Or what? I challenged, stepping closer. What are you going to do, Mark? You've already taken everything from me. What's left? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence said it all. He didn't think I had the guts to do anything. He thought I'd roll over, keep the secret for Emily's sake, and let him and Karen walk away unscathed. But he was wrong. I left his office without another word, slamming the door behind me. My mind was already spinning with possibilities. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted them to feel the weight of their betrayal, to watch their carefully constructed lies crumble around them. I started with Karen. When I got home, she was in the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened. She barely looked up when I walked in, her attention focused on chopping vegetables. We're having stir-fry tonight, she said casually, as if we hadn't just had the fight of our lives less than 24 hours ago. I went to see Mark, I said, cutting straight to the point. Her hand froze mid-chop. Slowly, she set the knife down and turned to face me. Why would you do that? To get the truth, I said, stepping closer. Since you clearly weren't interested in giving it to me. Karen crossed her arms, her face hardening. And what did he say? That you've been lying to me for 20 years. That this wasn't just one mistake. That it was an affair. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. It doesn't change anything, she said quietly. Emily is still your daughter. She's his daughter. I shot back, my voice rising. And you let me believe she was mine. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To find out your entire life has been a lie. Karen flinched, but she quickly recovered, her eyes flashing with defiance. You're overreacting. We did what was best for Emily. You should be thanking me. Thanking you, I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. For what? For humiliating me? For making me the punchline of your sick little secret? You're acting like a child, she snapped. Grow up. This isn't about you. You're right, I said, my voice low and steady. It's about what happens next. Her brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means, I said, stepping closer, that you and Mark are about to find out what it feels like to lose everything. The color drained from her face, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there, unsure of what was coming. But she'd know soon enough. The days that followed were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. I wasn't acting out of rage. Not anymore. The fury was still there, a fire burning low in my chest, but it was focused now. Every move I made was deliberate, calculated. If Karen and Mark thought I was going to crumble, they were about to be sorely disappointed. The first step was assembling my arsenal. I spent hours poring over financial documents, digging through emails, and meticulously combing through the records of every penny I'd ever spent on Emily. Tuition, trips, wedding expenses, it was all there, neatly categorized and itemized. If I was going to war, I wanted every piece of ammunition at my disposal. My lawyer, Tom, was skeptical when I told him what I was planning. You want to file for reimbursement? He asked, raising an eyebrow. You know how that's going to look in court, right? It won't win you sympathy. I'm not looking for sympathy, I said flatly. I'm looking for leverage. Tom nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're playing the long game. Exactly. It wasn't just about the money. It was about forcing them into a corner, about making sure they had no way out. Karen had always been quick to wield her sharp tongue and icy demeanor, but I knew her well enough to understand her weakness. She valued her image above all else. The thought of her dirty laundry being aired in court would terrify her. But that wasn't all I had planned. The next step was Emily. This was the hardest part, the one that kept me up at night. She was innocent in all of this, and the last thing I wanted was to hurt her. But she deserved the truth. She deserved to know who her parents really were and what they'd done. The question was how to tell her without completely destroying her world. I decided to start small. One evening, I invited her and Josh over for dinner. Karen was conveniently out running errands when they arrived, a detail I'd arranged ahead of time. I wanted Emily's full attention, without Karen's influence clouding her judgment. We talked about the usual things at first, the honeymoon, their plans for the future, Josh's new job. But as the evening wore on, I steered the conversation toward family. Have you ever wondered about your mom's side of the family? I asked casually, pouring Emily a glass of wine. She looked puzzled. What do you mean? Like where you come from? Your roots? Did you ever find anything interesting in that DNA test? Emily shrugged, sipping her wine. Not really. Mostly what I expected, European ancestry, nothing too surprising. Why? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. No reason. I was just curious. Family can be complicated sometimes. Josh chuckled. Isn't that the truth? Emily frowned, setting her glass down. Dad, is something going on? You've been acting different lately. I forced a smile. Just a lot on my mind, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. But she didn't look convinced. After they left, I sat in the empty house, my thoughts racing. The seeds had been planted. Now I just had to wait for the right moment to tell her everything. That moment came sooner than I expected. The following week, Karen confronted me in the driveway as I was leaving for work. She looked disheveled, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes bloodshot like she hadn't slept. What are you doing? She demanded, blocking my path. What are you talking about? I said, brushing past her. Don't play dumb, she snapped, grabbing my arm. You've been talking to Emily. What did you tell her? Nothing yet, I said, pulling free from her grip. But she's going to find out. One way or another. Karen's face twisted in fury. You're going to ruin everything. No, Karen, I said, turning to face her. You ruined everything. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Before she could respond, I got in my car and drove off, leaving her standing there, seething. That evening, I got a call from Emily. Dad, can we talk? She asked, her voice uncertain. Of course, I said. What's on your mind? It's just, Mom's been acting weird lately, and then there's the way you've been bringing up family stuff. Is there something I should know? I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Emily, there's something I need to tell you, but it's not something I can say over the phone. Can you come over tomorrow? She agreed, and I hung up, my hands shaking. The moment I'd been dreading was finally here. But as much as it terrified me, it also gave me hope. Because once Emily knew the truth, she'd understand why I had to do what I was about to do. And Karen and Mark? They wouldn't see it coming. The next day, the house was eerily quiet as I waited for Emily. I had rehearsed the conversation in my mind 100 times, but no matter how I framed it, there was no way to soften the blow. The truth was a wrecking ball, and I could only hope Emily would understand why I had to swing it. She arrived just after lunch, her face a mix of curiosity and concern. Josh wasn't with her, a small mercy, as this was a conversation I wanted to have privately. She hugged me at the door, her warmth cutting through the tension in my chest, and I nearly lost my resolve. Dad, she said, stepping back to study me. What's going on? You're scaring me. I gestured for her to sit on the couch, and I took the armchair across from her. For a moment, I just looked at her, taking in every detail, her eyes, her smile, her mannerisms. The girl I'd raised, the girl I'd thought was mine. Emily, I began, my voice heavy with emotion. There's something I need to tell you, and it's going to be hard to hear. She frowned, sitting forward. What is it? Is it about Mom? In a way, yes, I said. It's about Mom and Mark. Her confusion deepened, but she stayed silent, waiting for me to continue. You know I love you, I said, my voice cracking slightly, and nothing will ever change that. But recently, I found out something that shook me to my core. I found out that I'm not your biological father. Her reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened, and her hand flew to her mouth. What? I nodded, my throat tightening. I did a DNA test after you mentioned yours. The results showed that there's no biological connection between us. But how? She stammered. What does Mark have to do with this? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Mark is your biological father. Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she might faint. She stared at me, her eyes searching mine for any sign that this was some cruel joke. When she found none, she sank back into the couch, her hands trembling. This has to be a mistake, she whispered. Mom wouldn't, Mark wouldn't. They did, I said gently. I confronted both of them, and they admitted it. Mark has known since the day you were born. Your mother kept it from both of us, for different reasons, I'm sure. But the truth is out now. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head, her voice rising. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I only found out recently, I said. And as for your mother, I can't answer that. You'll have to ask her yourself. Emily buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled but gut-wrenching. I wanted to comfort her, but I knew this was something she needed to process on her own. After a few moments, she looked up, her expression shifting from devastation to anger. Does Josh know? She asked. No, I said firmly, and I don't think it's something you need to share with him right now. This is your story to tell when you're ready. Her jaw tightened, and she wiped her tears away with the back of her hand. I need to talk to Mom. I nodded, standing to let her pass. She's at the house. Do you want me to come with you? No, she said, her voice sharp. I need to do this alone. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I let out a long breath, sinking back into the chair. I knew Karen would be furious with me for telling Emily, but I didn't care. The damage was done, and it was her mess to clean up now. What I didn't expect was the phone call I received an hour later. It was Emily, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. Dad, I'm at Mark's house. You need to get here. Now. Why? I asked, already grabbing my keys. Because Mom's here too, she said. And things are escalating. I didn't ask for details. I just drove. When I arrived, the scene was chaos. Emily was standing in the front yard, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Karen and Mark were yelling at each other on the porch, their words indistinct but clearly heated. Emily, I said, pulling her aside. What happened? They both denied it at first, she said bitterly. But when I told them you'd already told me everything, they turned on each other. Mom's blaming Mark for not staying away. Mark's blaming her for lying to him. It's disgusting. Her voice broke, and I wrapped an arm around her, shielding her from the shouting match. Karen turned then, spotting us, and her face twisted in fury. This is your fault? She screamed, pointing at me. You had no right to tell her. I had every right, I said coldly. She deserved the truth. Something you clearly don't understand. Mark tried to step in, but Emily's voice cut through the chaos. Enough, she shouted, silencing all of us. Her eyes were blazing, her face set in a determined glare. I don't want to hear another word from either of you. I'm done. She turned to me, her voice softening. Take me home, Dad. And just like that, I won the first battle. But the war was far from over. The car ride back home with Emily was tense, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. She sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her jaw clenched tightly. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But we both knew the truth. It wouldn't be. Not for a long time. When we got to the house, she went straight to her old room without a word. I let her go. She needed space and I needed time to think. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I poured myself a drink and sat in the darkened living room, my mind racing. Karen and Mark's argument at his house had been a glimpse into their unraveling, and I planned to use that to my advantage. They'd spent years conspiring in silence, but now their alliance was crumbling. And a divided enemy is easier to conquer. The first step was leverage. Karen had always been meticulous about appearances, priding herself on being the perfect wife and mother. If the truth about Emily got out, it would destroy her carefully crafted image. She wouldn't just lose her reputation. She'd lose the support of her family, her friends, and maybe even her share of the assets in the divorce I was now certain I'd file. Mark, on the other hand, had more to lose than just his reputation. As it turned out, my earlier digging had uncovered some interesting financial irregularities in his business dealings. I hadn't been sure what to do with the information at first, but now I knew exactly how to use it. The next morning, Emily emerged from her room, looking exhausted but resolute. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. "I'm sorry for dragging you into all this," I said softly. "You didn't drag me into anything," she replied. "This is Mom's mess, and Mark's. But I need to know, what happens now?" "I'm working on it," I said, trying to sound confident. "But I need you to trust me." She nodded slowly. "I do. Just don't let them hurt you anymore." Her words lit a fire in me. Whatever it took, I would make sure Emily never had to deal with their betrayal again. Later that day, I met with Tom to finalize my plans. "We'll start with Karen," I said. "I want her served with divorce papers by the end of the week, and make sure the financial records include every penny I've spent on Emily since she was born. She's going to see exactly what her lies cost me." Tom hesitated. "Are you sure you want to include Emily in this? She's on your side right now, but if Karen spins this the wrong way—" "She won't," I said firmly. "Not after everything that's happened. Besides, this isn't about Emily, it's about accountability." "And Mark?" Tom asked. "I'm handling him myself." Tom raised an eyebrow but didn't press the issue. That evening, I made my move. I sent Karen a text, telling her we needed to talk. Predictably, she ignored it, so I sent another, this time with a picture attached. It was a screenshot of an email I drafted to her closest friends and family, detailing everything: the affair, the DNA test, and Mark's involvement. The message was clear: respond to me or this goes out. It didn't take long for my phone to buzz. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" "Me, giving you a chance to do the right thing. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. My lawyer's office." "Karen, you're bluffing." I didn't reply. Let her wonder. The next morning, she was waiting outside the office when I arrived. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup immaculate, but the cracks were showing. Her eyes were puffy, and she kept glancing over her shoulder like someone might see her. Inside, we sat across from each other in a sterile conference room. Tom laid out the terms: full financial transparency, an even split of assets, and a written acknowledgement of her affair with Mark. "This is outrageous," Karen hissed, her voice low but venomous. "You're lucky I'm not asking for more," I said. "Take the deal, Karen. It's better than what'll happen if we go to court." Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't dare." I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "Try me." The standoff lasted a full minute before she finally looked away, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "Fine," she muttered. "But don't think for a second this means you've won." "Oh, I haven't even started," I said, standing to leave. From there, I turned my attention to Mark. Using the financial information I'd uncovered, I made a few calls to contacts in the business world, carefully planting seeds of doubt about his integrity. Within days, rumors were swirling, and Mark's clients were pulling out of deals left and right. By the time he called me, he was desperate. "You need to stop this," he said, his voice shaking. "Why?" I asked. "I'm just leveling the playing field." "You've made your point," he said. "But if you keep pushing, you're going to ruin me." "Good," I said coldly. "Now you know how it feels." Mark tried to respond, but I hung up, savoring the sound of his panic. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time in weeks I felt like I was finally in control. And Karen and Mark? They were just beginning to feel the weight of what they'd done. The fallout from my moves against Karen and Mark began to spiral faster than even I had anticipated. I wasn't just watching them fall. I was orchestrating it one precise strike at a time. But this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking back control of a life they'd tried to rewrite without my permission. Karen's response to the divorce papers came quickly and predictably. She countered with accusations, claiming I was being vindictive and unreasonable. Her lawyer reached out with a smugly worded letter, suggesting mediation to protect Emily's well-being. It was a weak attempt to guilt me, and I didn't take the bait. I forwarded the letter to Tom, adding a simple note, "Proceed with everything." Meanwhile, Mark's world was crumbling. The whispers about his financial dealings were growing louder, and I knew he was scrambling to patch the cracks. He called me twice since our last conversation, each voicemail angrier than the last. I ignored them. He was desperate, and desperation made people sloppy. But it was Emily who surprised me the most. She wasn't just angry. She was determined. She started digging into Karen and Mark's relationship, combing through old photos and family records, looking for anything that might shed light on how deep their betrayal went. I didn't stop her. She had every right to know the truth. One evening, she came to me with a box of old letters she'd found in the attic. Most of them were innocuous, but one stood out, a note from Mark to Karen, dated shortly after Emily's birth. It was brief but damning. "Karen, I can't stop thinking about you. Seeing Emily today made everything so real. She's perfect. Thank you for letting me be a part of this, even if it's from the sidelines. I know it's hard, but I'll do whatever it takes to keep our secret safe." The note was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakably Mark's. Emily stared at the letter, her hands trembling. "How could she do this?" she whispered. "How could they both do this?" I didn't have an answer for her. All I could do was hold her as she cried, my anger simmering just below the surface. The next day, I made my move against Mark. I scheduled a meeting with him under the guise of discussing a way forward. He agreed, likely hoping to negotiate a truce. We met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop far from prying eyes. Mark arrived looking worse for wear. His usual polished appearance was gone, replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a rumpled suit. He looked like a man on the edge, and I intended to push him over. "Thanks for coming," I said, keeping my tone neutral as we sat down. "What do you want?" he asked, skipping the pleasantries. "I want you to admit what you've done," I said bluntly. "Not just to me, but to Emily." Mark's eyes flickered with panic. "That's not going to happen. Then things are going to get worse for you," I said, sliding a folder across the table. He opened it reluctantly, his face blanching as he saw the documents inside. They detailed his financial misconduct, complete with evidence I'd gathered through a private investigator. "This is blackmail," he said, his voice trembling. "No," I corrected. "This is leverage. You come clean to Emily, and I don't share this with your clients or the authorities. It's your choice." Mark stared at me, his jaw working as he tried to come up with a response. Finally, he leaned back, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "Fine," he said. "I'll talk to her." "Good," I said, standing to leave. "But if you try to lie your way out of this, I won't hold back." That night, Emily confronted Mark in my presence. He stammered and stumbled through an apology, but it was clear he wasn't sorry for what he'd done, only for being caught. Emily saw through him immediately. "You don't get to be a part of my life anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "You don't deserve it." Mark tried to argue, but I stepped in. "You heard her," I said, my tone cold. "Leave." He glared at me but said nothing as he walked out. Karen, on the other hand, was far from done fighting. The next morning, she stormed into the house, her eyes blazing. "What the hell did you do to Mark?" she demanded. "Nothing he didn't deserve," I said calmly. "You're tearing this family apart," she shouted. "No, Karen," I said, stepping closer. "You tore this family apart. I'm just making sure you feel the consequences." Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. As she turned to leave, she spat one final threat. "You'll regret this." But as I watched her go, I knew I wouldn't. I'd spent too long being the victim. It was time to take my life back. The storm Karen had promised came quicker than expected. By the next morning, I woke to a barrage of text messages and missed calls from mutual friends and family. Karen had started spinning her version of events, a tale where I was the controlling, vindictive husband hellbent on destroying her and Emily out of spite. It was a clever move, She didn't deny the affair but framed it as a mistake from decades ago, something she claimed we had worked through. According to her, my discovery of the DNA test was just a convenient excuse to lash out and tear the family apart. The reactions were mixed. Some friends bought her story, their messages dripping with pity for her plight. Others, likely aware of Karen's manipulative tendencies, reached out cautiously, asking for my side of the story. I didn't reply to any of them. Not yet. I had bigger plans. Emily was furious when she found out. "She's trying to make you the bad guy," she said, pacing the living room. "How can she even say we worked through it? I didn't even know until last week." "She's grasping at straws," I said calmly. "Let her dig her hole deeper. The truth has a way of surfacing." Emily wanted to confront her, but I stopped her. "Not yet," I said. "There's a time and place for everything. Trust me." Instead, I spent the day preparing my next move. The file I'd sent to Mark had only been the tip of the iceberg. The private investigator I'd hired had uncovered more than just financial misconduct. Mark had been involved in shady business deals for years, skirting the edge of legality. I compiled everything into a neat, damning package and sent it anonymously to the local media. By the following morning, Mark's name was plastered across the headlines. "Local businessman accused of fraud, tax evasion." The article didn't name me, but the timing wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. I received a frantic call from Mark that I let go to voicemail. Karen, predictably, showed up at the house shortly after. She banged on the door until I opened it, her face red with fury. "What did you do?" she hissed, pushing past me into the living room. "Good morning to you too," I said dryly, closing the door behind her. "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "You leaked those files. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done," I said, crossing my arms. "I've shown the world who Mark really is. The same thing I'll do to you if you keep pushing me." Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear breaking through her rage. "You wouldn't. Try me," I said, my voice low and steady. "You've spent decades lying, manipulating, and destroying trust. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" Karen clenched her fists, her facade crumbling. "You're going to regret this," she said, her voice shaking. "No, Karen," I said, stepping closer. "The only people regretting anything right now are you and Mark. And this is just the beginning." She stormed out without another word, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. That night, Emily and I sat on the couch, watching the news coverage of Mark's scandal unfold. She didn't say much, but the relief on her face was clear. The weight of the lies was lifting piece by piece. "You're really doing it," she said quietly. "You're taking them down." "I told you I would," I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't just about me, Emily. It's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else the way they've hurt us." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Hearing her say that made every step of this battle worth it. But the war wasn't over yet. There was one final move to make. The final move was the hardest but also the most satisfying. By now, Karen and Mark's carefully constructed worlds were in tatters. Mark's business had imploded under the weight of the media storm, his clients abandoning him in droves. Karen had become a social pariah among her friends, whispers of the affair spreading faster than she could control. And Emily? She had cut ties with both of them, choosing to stay with me as she tried to rebuild her own life. But there was one last piece of unfinished business. I had asked Emily to join me for dinner at her favorite restaurant, just the two of us. She looked tired but stronger than she had in weeks, her resilience shining through. Over dessert, I slid a small envelope across the table to her. "What's this?" she asked, frowning as she picked it up. "Open it," I said, leaning back in my chair. Inside was a letter, handwritten and carefully worded. It wasn't from me, it was from Mark. "I found it in some of Mom's old things," I explained. "It was dated a few weeks after you were born. I thought you should see it." She read it in silence, her expression shifting from confusion to anger to something softer. When she finished, she set the letter down and looked at me. "He really loved me," she said quietly. "In his own messed up way, he loved me." "I think he did," I said. But love without accountability isn't worth much. He made his choices, Emily, just like Karen did. And now they're paying the price. She nodded, wiping away a tear. What do I do with this? Whatever you want, I said. You don't owe him anything. But if you feel like you need closure, this might be a good place to start. She smiled faintly, folding the letter and tucking it back into the envelope. Thank you for giving me this, and for everything else. We finished dinner and drove home in comfortable silence. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. That night, I sat in my study, reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the anger. It had all consumed me for so long. But as I sat there, staring at a photo of Emily from her wedding day, I realized something. Revenge wasn't what had brought me closure. It was the truth. The simple, brutal truth that had freed me from the prison Karen and Mark had built around me. For decades, I had lived in the shadow of someone else's choices, believing the lie that my love and effort weren't enough. But they were. They always had been. Emily's strength, her courage, her loyalty. All of it came from the life I had built with her. That was real. That was mine. In the end, life is about the people who stand with you when the storm comes. Karen and Mark had chosen to stand alone, clinging to their lies. But Emily, she had chosen me, and that was all the victory I needed. As I turned off the light and headed to bed, I carried one final lesson with me. A lesson for every man who's ever felt the sting of betrayal. It's not about the battles you lose. It's about the ones you choose to fight, and what you're willing to stand for when the dust settles. Because the truth is the only thing that lasts.
Here's to new beginnings, Denise said, lifting her wine glass with that same tight, rehearsed smile she wore when she lied to the neighbors about why I hadn't been at the last block party. Her voice echoed in the too quiet dining room. She tapped her fork against her glass. Ting, ting, ting. Everyone turned to her. Everyone but me. I already knew. It wasn't the way her hand trembled or how she avoided my eyes. It was the second wine glass to her right, already half empty, lipstick smudged on the rim, and I don't wear lipstick. Harold and I have decided to go our separate ways, she began, clearing her throat theatrically. Actually, I decided. She waited. Dramatic pause. Like this was dinner theater, and I was the intermission. We took a vote, she added, scanning the faces around the table. And you're out. I looked up slowly. Her brothers, Glenn and Mitch, both gave those awkward half-shrugs, as if they were sorry but not sorry enough to stand up. Her sister-in-law sipped wine like it was her job, but it was our daughter, Karen, that hit hardest. She looked away, didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't cry, just looked away. That was the first cut, not the deepest, but the first. I didn't ask why. I didn't plead. I didn't lean over the table, demand answers, throw the roast chicken to the floor like some broken sitcom husband. I simply folded my napkin, stood up, and said, "Thank you for dinner." Denise blinked. That part hadn't been rehearsed. No response, she asked, eyebrows raised. "You're just going to walk away?" I reached for my coat. "You already decided, remember? Voted and all." Her mouth opened, probably to say something smug, but I didn't give her the space. I left. The cold air hit harder than I expected. December wind slicing through my shirt sleeves like glass. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes without starting the engine, just watching the condensation from my breath fade against the windshield. Thinking, calculating. See, when you spend 27 years in silence, when you're the one who fixes plumbing at midnight, who files taxes early, who double-checks the insurance policies, you start noticing patterns. Movements. The way a name disappears from a joint account before anyone says a word. The way your daughter suddenly starts calling your wife Denise instead of Mom. I had noticed. The vote was just the announcement. The decision had been made long ago. I drove to the cabin. Not the one Denise's family always claimed was ours. No, I mean mine. The one deeded before the marriage. Tucked away in the Berkshires, cold as hell, but with a working fireplace and a safe under the floorboards. Inside that safe were 3 folders: personal, property, and backup. I took out property first and started crossing out my own name. Not out of grief, out of strategy. You want me out, Denise? Fine, but let's see what that really means. Denise strutted through the community center like she was auditioning for a reality show no one asked to watch. Loud laughs. Over-explained gestures. Harold's taking it so well, she said to Susan from yoga, like I was a golden retriever who just rolled over on command. Really mature about the whole thing. I think deep down he knew it was time. Time. That's the one thing she never saw ticking. While she was sipping sangria and fielding supportive DMs from high school exes, I was at the courthouse, filing paperwork with the calm of a man double-checking a grocery list. The clerk looked surprised when I said I wanted to revoke my name from the joint marital trust. Most men fight tooth and nail, she said. Most men don't have a 20-year folder, I replied. Because that's the thing. While Denise played queen of the divorce parade, I was 10 steps into an endgame she didn't even know existed. First, the accounts. We had 3. Personal checking, emergency savings, and the joint goals fund she once swore was for our Tuscany anniversary. That one had become a slush fund for her wellness retreats and overpriced wine. I left exactly $1.47 in each and transferred the rest into accounts under Reynolds Consulting Holdings, LLC. Newly formed, legally separate, filed through a law firm in Vermont, where LLC registries didn't require public officer names. Next came the house, but not the obvious house. The one she thought was theirs. I'd long ago added a deed rider to the family cabin, classifying it under premarital assets held in a solo trust. She never noticed, never cared. It was just the woods. Until I updated the trust to restrict access to any party not named in the original deed. That would come in handy soon enough. Then, the business. Reynolds IT Solutions. She always thought it was ours because she took the photos for the website and answered the phone when I was sick. Sweet. I signed it over to an umbrella LLC that, legally speaking, now belonged to the Harold Reynolds Family Survivorship Trust. Funny how people only pay attention when you add your name to something. No one ever notices the quiet disappearance of one. I changed my mailing address to a private P.O. box. Installed encrypted cloud backups of every financial document from the past decade. I even updated the metadata on Denise's favorite family photos. Don't ask why, just know it'll matter later. The only time I paused was when I saw a note tucked into an old file marked Karen College. It was a receipt for the last tuition payment I made. In full. She never knew that I used my private inheritance, not our joint savings, to make it happen. I folded it and slid it into a new folder labeled, To Be Found. By the end of the week, Denise's version of Mature Harold had become the story she told over wine tastings and brunches. He's so dignified, she gushed. No drama at all. Dignified? No, I was just busy. Because some men yell when betrayed. Others build traps so quiet, no one hears the floor drop until it's too late. It was a Thursday afternoon when Denise decided the house needed a fresh start. That's what she called it in her Facebook post. Anyway, new chapter ahead. House going on the market. Open to offers, house with garden, dizzy, hashtag fresh start, hashtag unbothered. The post got 74 likes, mostly from divorcees and wannabe influencers who'd never met Harold but loved the idea of a woman reclaiming her life. What Denise didn't post was the part where she vacuumed in heels an hour before the agent arrived and hid the liquor bottles behind the antique china. Appearances still mattered. The realtor, a polished 30-something named Kendra, was all smiles and nods. Oh wow, original crown molding. This is going to fly off the market. Denise beamed. It's all in great shape. We did the kitchen last fall. That word still burned on her tongue, but she used it out of habit. They did a full walkthrough. Kendra scribbled excitedly into her iPad. 3 bedrooms, that sunroom, 2-car garage. Honestly, with the market right now, we could get above asking. Have you spoken to your attorney yet? He'll need to prep the ownership documents. Denise smiled and waved her hand. It's all clean. The house is in my name and Harold's, but he's, let's just say, not the confrontational type. She meant it as an insult. Kendra heard it as reassurance. The next day, Denise arrived at her lawyer's office wearing that burnt orange blazer she saved for what she called power moves. She sat across from Alan, her attorney of 5 years, who had the patience of a tax auditor and the charisma of a filing cabinet. He opened the file, squinted, then frowned. Huh. Denise's heels clicked impatiently beneath the desk. What? There's something here you need to see. She leaned forward, lips already curled in irritation. Alan turned the page. According to this updated filing, dated 8 months ago, there's a rider on the deed. A restrictive clause filed through a third-party notary, signed and notarized by Harold. Denise blinked. What clause? Alan adjusted his glasses. It says, and I quote, property is non-transferable or subject to sale pending dissolution of marriage unless executed with mutual consent as per marital survivorship clause C. She squinted. What the hell does that mean? It means, he said slowly, you can't sell the house without Harold's approval. And that clause supersedes default community property laws in this state. Denise laughed. Actually laughed. That can't be right. I never signed anything like that. You didn't need to, Alan replied. You see, the original deed was filed solely under Harold's name before the marriage. Later, he added your name via survivorship, not co-ownership. Then, last year, he reverted it via an addendum while maintaining survivorship status, which is legal, apparently. She stopped laughing. Are you telling me he planned this? I'm saying, he filed this 8 months ago, and you signed nothing to prevent it. The blood drained from her face in slow, pulsing waves. Alan flipped to the signature page. Neat. Precise. Harold's handwriting. Dated right around the time they were renewing their vows in Maui. The same week she'd been texting Glenn from accounting under the name Beth. Denise sat very still, then stood too fast. I need to speak to him, she snapped. Alan closed the file. I doubt he's picking up. He was right. I wasn't. At that exact moment, I was on the back deck of my condo, watching a red-tailed hawk circle above the trees. I sipped coffee, checked the time, then smiled. She'd found the first breadcrumb. Only 9 more to go. Denise arrived at the attorney's office like she was walking into a closing ceremony, not a legal consultation. She wore her gold cuff bracelet, the one she only dusted off when she wanted to signal that everything's under control. Her nails were done in some shade called Victory Red, and her smile had the tight pull of a woman who's convinced the win is already hers. Let's get this wrapped, she chirped, tossing her designer tote onto the chair. I have a showing lined up Saturday and 2 couples already messaging me through Zillow. The paralegal, a young woman named Britt with tortoiseshell glasses and the posture of someone trying not to flinch, shifted awkwardly. We've been reviewing the property paperwork and, well, Mr. Carson wanted me to wait until everyone was present. Everyone. Denise glanced at Alan, her lawyer, who offered a dry, nervous smile and motioned toward the closed door. It opened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped in. Not Harold. Some other attorney. Mid-50s. Calm eyes. Briefcase that had clearly seen more war than fashion. Ms. Reynolds, he said, extending a hand. I'm Walter Emery. I represent Mr. Harold Reynolds. Denise's face twitched. He's lawyering up now? Really? Emery didn't blink. He already did. Months ago. She snorted. All right. What is this? You're going to contest the sale? He walked away. Walter nodded slowly, then motioned for Britt. The paralegal opened a thin red folder, removed a certified copy of the deed, and cleared her throat. On March 14th, she began. A revised property agreement was filed by Mr. Reynolds, authenticated through the state registry. The clause in question is under Section D, Paragraph 7. She glanced up. Alan was already flipping through his copy, brow furrowed. Then Britt read aloud, voice flat but final. This property is not legally transferable. Denise blinked. I'm sorry. What? Britt repeated it. This property is not legally transferable. That's the clause. No, that makes no sense, Denise said, shaking her head with a dry laugh. It's our marital home. I can sell it. I have power of. Walter interjected gently. You had assumed power of sale until the deed was amended. The original owner, Mr. Reynolds, never relinquished full title. The survivorship clause you relied on was invalidated by the new filing. Without my consent. He nodded. He didn't need it. You weren't a co-owner. You were a survivorship addendum on a trust-controlled asset. Alan looked like someone had hit him with a pillow full of bricks. Denise's jaw clenched. This is some legal loophole. This won't hold in court. It already did, Walter replied, sliding another document forward. It's been reviewed and upheld. You were notified through registered mail, per process, to the residence in your name. She stared at him. He stared back. Then her mouth fell open. That week. March. She'd been in Cabo with her sisters, bragging about freedom and flirtations and how Harold had finally learned to shut up. The certified letter had arrived, all right. Sat unopened on the foyer table for weeks. She tossed it, assuming it was junk. Maybe even bragged about that too. Wait, she said, breath shallow. This isn't enforceable. Alan didn't respond. She turned to him, whispering now. Alan. He rubbed his temple. It's binding. The air left the room like someone had pulled the oxygen out through a straw. Britt quietly excused herself. Walter simply closed the folder. And Denise? Denise, who had walked in already planning what tile to install after the sale, now sat frozen. Because 6 words, buried deep, perfectly timed, and signed beneath her nose, had just turned her golden parachute into a cinder block. This property is not legally transferable. It echoed. And this time, there were no likes, no hashtags, no backup plan. Just Harold. And his silence. Denise didn't walk into the lawyer's office she stormed in, like a thundercloud wearing heels. The receptionist barely had time to say good after, before Denise slapped her sunglasses onto the counter and snapped, Where's Jeremy? Jeremy, the family lawyer, had handled everything from her mother's will to her sister's prenup disaster. He was supposed to be her safety net. The man who once told her during brunch, Don't worry, Denise, paper always beats drama. Well, the paper was bleeding now. Jeremy came out of his office with a nervous half-smile and the look of a man who just realized the bomb under his desk was ticking. Denise, I was just reviewing the... Save it, she said, pushing past him. I want answers. Now. They sat. Explain to me, she hissed, tossing down the file from yesterday's meeting, how my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, managed to lock me out of selling my own damn house. Jeremy's mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a goldfish on its 3rd panic attack. Denise, I wasn't involved in that filing. That deed update? It wasn't through us. She froze. What do you mean it wasn't through us? You've handled our estate for 15 years. I assumed he'd use me, Jeremy admitted. But apparently he retained separate counsel. Her voice dropped, low and sharp. Who? He sighed. A firm based out of Maine. Emery and Castell. Small, but surgical. They specialize in preemptive asset restructuring. She blinked. You're telling me he brought in some off-grid legal assassins from Maine? I wouldn't put it quite that way. How the hell did he even know about them? Jeremy hesitated. They're former federal tax litigators. Extremely discreet. Mostly do generational wealth transfers and, well, trust cloaking. Trust cloaking? What the hell does that even mean? He rubbed the back of his neck. It means there's likely a blind trust involved. And if there is, no one, not you, not me, not even a judge without cause, can see the terms unless Harold authorizes it. Her voice hitched. You're saying he controls it? Technically, the trustee does. But yes, he holds the keys. Denise stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped. Unacceptable. She pulled out her phone, called her divorce attorney, Melissa Ford, the woman with 4 degrees and a courtroom kill streak. After a brief, snappy exchange, Melissa agreed to conference in Jeremy. 2 minutes later, all 3 were on speaker. Denise paced the office like a caged lioness. Melissa's voice came through, sharp and clipped. Jeremy, can you confirm the trust Harold set up is legally valid and inaccessible? Jeremy exhaled. Yes. And more than that, it was registered interstate. This firm insulated it through out-of-state jurisdiction, which means, even if we contest, we'd have to do it there, which would take time, resources, and a judge inclined to override trust law precedent. Melissa was silent. Then, son of a bitch. Denise stopped pacing. What? You're not just locked out of the house, Denise, Melissa said slowly. You're locked out of everything. The accounts, the pension, the business. You said you 2 shared the LLC. We did, she snapped. Correction, Melissa said. You thought you did. If you rolled those into the trust, he likely dissolved your name and restructured without telling you. Perfectly legal if the bylaws allow it. And if you weren't a managing member. Denise's knees hit the edge of Jeremy's desk. She sank into the chair. Melissa, she whispered. Can you fix this? There was a pause, a silence so brutal it felt like an answer. Then, "I'll try." Click. The call ended. Denise stared straight ahead. Jeremy looked down, pretending to read something. In that moment, it hit her. This wasn't a war she was waging. It was a game she'd already lost months ago. While she'd been throwing shade on social media and feeding her friends stories of Harold's midlife shutdown, he'd been sculpting a silent empire. Not out of rage. Out of precision. Out of knowing. And now? She was on the outside, looking in. At everything she once mocked. Everything she once owned. And the doors weren't just locked. They were gone. She knocked quietly, 3 soft taps, no doorbell. Like she wasn't sure if she had the right to be there. When I opened the door, Karen stood in the hallway with her arms wrapped around herself, wearing that oversized hoodie from her grad school days and no makeup. Not her usual performance-ready look. Her eyes were red. She wasn't crying. Not yet. But she looked like someone who had run out of justifications. "I didn't know where else to go," she murmured. I stepped aside. "You found it anyway." She walked in, eyes scanning the condo. Sparse, clean, almost too orderly. No pictures on the walls yet, just a few books, a kettle, and a massive ceramic bowl she made for me back in 7th grade. She noticed it immediately. Her fingers traced the warped edge. One corner was still chipped. "You kept this?" she asked, more to herself than to me. I didn't answer. Just motioned toward the couch. She sat, silent for a minute. Then another. Finally, "Why didn't you fight back?" I poured 2 mugs of tea. Sat across from her. "You mean why didn't I shout in a restaurant while people clinked glasses and pretended betrayal was a toast?" Her lips pressed tight. "I could have made noise, sure," I continued. "But that only feeds their story." Instead, I left them the stage and rewrote the script. Karen stared into her mug like it might give her better answers. "It just felt like you disappeared." I didn't say anything. Let the silence sit a bit longer. After a while, I stood and walked to my desk, pulled out a thin black folder and placed it gently on the coffee table. "I wasn't planning to show this yet," I said, "but I figure it's time." She hesitated. Opened it. Inside, a copy of the educational trust agreement from when she was 12. My signature. Original terms. Funding details. A ledger of every contribution made, every tuition bill paid. Line by line. There were notes in the margins. Questions I'd asked financial advisors about locking in lower interest rates, maximizing her Roth IRA, whether she'd get penalized if she took a semester off. At the bottom, an annotation dated 2 years ago. "Do not allow this fund to be touched under any marital condition. Irrevocable. For Karen. Always." Her hand covered her mouth. She flipped the page. There were savings bonds. An insurance policy with her listed as sole beneficiary. A letter addressed to her, still sealed. She looked up. "You knew this was coming?" I didn't answer. She swallowed. "Hard. Mom always said you just gave up. That you were tired. Small." I leaned back, sipping my tea. That's what people say when they mistake silence for surrender. Karen didn't speak for a long time. Her eyes moved over the documents again. Slowly. Carefully. Like she was relearning a language she used to speak fluently, before Denise taught her a new one. Then she asked, so softly I barely caught it, "Was this always the plan?" I gave her a small shrug. "Let's just say I planned for all the outcomes, even the ones I hoped wouldn't happen." She closed the folder, held it like it was fragile. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know," I said. She left it on the table when she stood to go, but turned at the door. She's scared. She won't admit it, but she's unraveling. I didn't flinch. Truth has a way of doing that. Karen paused. "I don't know where I stand anymore." "You don't have to decide right now," I said, walking her to the door. "But take this." I handed her the letter. She looked down at it like it burned. When the door shut behind her, I leaned my head against it for a second. Outside, I heard her footsteps pause, then slowly fade. One visit doesn't undo betrayal, but it cracks the armor. And Karen was already starting to hear the sound it makes when the lies no longer echo. They met at Glenn's place, neutral ground. His wife was conveniently at Pilates, which everyone knew meant she didn't want to be dragged into another one of Denise's damage control campaigns. The blinds were drawn. The wine was open. Denise had called it a strategy session, like they were generals planning a counteroffensive, not siblings cleaning up the wreckage of her crumbling life. So here's the situation, Denise began, swirling her glass like the oxygen would make the facts go down easier. Harold's boxed me out. The house, the accounts, even the damn cabin. I need both of you to help me contest the trust. We can prove he manipulated the filings. He was sneaky, calculated, vindictive. Mitch leaned forward, arms crossed. Glenn stayed quiet, eyes flicking between them. Denise continued. If we show it was done in bad faith, behind my back, we can get it reopened. I just need family support. You two can sign statements. Back me up. Say he always treated me coldly, withheld things, that he wasn't honest. Mitch tilted his head. You want us to lie? No, Denise said too quickly. I want you to support me. You've seen how he was. Always quiet. Controlling. We need to paint the picture. Glenn finally raised a hand. Denise. She stopped mid-sentence. I talked to him. Silence. You what? Last week. He called me. Said he knew all this would come crashing soon. Said he didn't want to drag anyone through it. But he left some documents in my Dropbox. Asked me to look through them before I picked a side. Her eyes narrowed. And you did? Glenn nodded. I did. Denise's smile tightened. So now he's manipulating you too? Glenn looked at her like she'd just insulted his IQ. He sent me the original home purchase records. From before the wedding. The closing costs. His solo loan. You said you both paid for that house. We did. I helped decorate it. I paid for the new kitchen. Denise, Mitch cut in. You told us he was broke when you met. That you pulled him up. She scoffed. He was. Emotionally. Spiritually. But not financially. Glenn said flatly. You never told us about the prenup either. Denise's heart rate kicked like a drumline. What prenup? The one he had you sign 6 days before the wedding. I saw it. Your signature's there. I was pressured. It was last minute. I didn't understand. Denise, Mitch said quietly. You were bragging about how you were marrying up back then. That he had real money and wouldn't be like your exes. She set her wine glass down too hard. The clink echoed. You're supposed to have my back, she hissed. Not his. We've had your back for years, Glenn said, tone harder now. When you said he was cold, we believed you. When you said he hid things, we assumed he was gaslighting. But you never once mentioned the financial stuff. Not the house, not the prenup, not the business. You painted him as this doormat. Turns out he was just quiet. Mitch looked uneasy. I always thought it was weird how you'd talk over him at every dinner. Like he was a placeholder. Denise stood. You think I'm the villain now? Glenn didn't stand. Just looked up at her calmly. No. I think the story's more complicated than you let on. And I think, Mitch added, you're on your own with this one. It landed like a slap. The room shrank. Denise scanned their faces, looking for a crack, a waver, something she could push. But there was none. Just two brothers who finally realized they'd been playing background characters in a narrative she'd been scripting alone. She grabbed her purse. Thanks for nothing, she snapped, marching toward the door. Just before she left, Glenn called after her. You might want to call Karen. Denise paused. What? She came by my office yesterday. Asked me about trust laws. Said she's been thinking about some things. Denise's breath caught. And? She asked. He shrugged. Didn't say. But she didn't sound like she was on your side. Denise left. This time, the door didn't slam. It clicked. Soft. Final. And for the first time in this unraveling saga, she walked away without applause, without backup. Just her own footsteps echoing down the hall of a story she no longer controlled. The moment Denise's car screeched into the Wellsford Bank parking lot, she looked like someone trying to beat the clock on a sinking ship. She double-parked, barely grabbed her purse, and power-walked through the glass doors like she expected someone to snatch the last slice of pie off her plate. The account was one of the few remaining scraps she thought she could still claim. A small investment fund Harold had opened back in 2006. It had been meant for legacy gifts, whatever that meant. She'd forgotten about it until Melissa, her divorce attorney, mentioned there might still be residuals in the system. Estimated value? Just under $94,000. Not life-changing, but enough to feel like a victory. Enough to win something. Hi, I need to close an account, she said breathlessly to the woman at the counter, already fishing out her ID. It's under Reynolds. Joint ownership, but I'm here in person, should be fine. The teller, polite but stiff, took the ID and clicked away at the keyboard. Then paused. More clicks. A frown. A glance at another monitor. Denise's eyes narrowed. Is something wrong? The teller cleared her throat. I'm going to bring in a manager. Just one moment, please. That sentence alone felt like a slap. 2 minutes later, a branch manager appeared. Early 40s, overly calm, clipboard in hand. Ms. Reynolds? I'm Michelle. Mind stepping into the conference room for a moment? In the room, with the blinds partially closed and the air too cold, Michelle sat opposite Denise with the gentleness of someone about to give bad news at a funeral. So, Michelle began, we see you're attempting to withdraw from account number 1792. Yes, it's in my name. Michelle gave a practiced smile. It was. Technically, it was under both your names, until the account underwent scheduled reallocation 2 weeks ago. Denise blinked. Scheduled what? Michelle tapped the clipboard. The account was subject to a timed release clause. Executed via standing instruction. Fully authorized. Authorized by who? Mr. Harold Reynolds. It was arranged nearly 18 months ago, actually. Michelle turned the clipboard around and slid it across the table. Denise scanned the document. There it was, plain as day. Final distribution to be executed automatically upon initiation of divorce proceedings or upon marital asset dispute, whichever occurs first. Beneficiary, the Evelyn Carter Foundation for Girls in STEM. Denise's throat closed. The what foundation? Michelle didn't flinch. The Evelyn Carter Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, established by Mr. Reynolds in honor of your late mother. The words hit like a punch to the lungs. You're telling me you funneled our money into a charity named after my mother? Michelle nodded. Yes. The transfer cleared last Monday. Denise tried to steady her voice. I want to contest it. That money was partly mine. Michelle gave the kind of apologetic shrug that banks hand out when they've already locked the vault. Unfortunately, charitable transfers executed under irrevocable clauses are protected. You'd have to sue the foundation directly. Denise froze. And then came the real horror, what that would mean. To claw that money back, she'd need to file suit against the Evelyn Carter Foundation. Her mother. The woman she had eulogized as a pillar of compassion and progress. She'd have to publicly claim her ex-husband's tribute to her mother was fraudulent. That her mother's name had no right to support underprivileged girls in tech. The PR alone would be a bloodbath. And it wouldn't stop there. Reporters would dig. The narrative would twist. Ex-wife sues charity named for her own mother after losing a state battle. Social media would eat her alive. Is there any other recourse? She asked, voice smaller than she meant it to be. Michelle shook her head. I'm afraid not. Denise stood, suddenly unsure of how legs even worked. Outside, as she stumbled back into the parking lot, a notification buzzed on her phone. Karen had posted a photo. A scholarship award letter, framed. Captioned, "Thank you to the Evelyn Carter Foundation. Some legacies are bigger than the people who try to control them." The comment section was already filling up. Denise's hands trembled as she scrolled. And in that moment, standing in a parking lot, betrayed not just by a man, but by optics, she realized something brutal. She wasn't just losing battles. She was suing ghosts. And ghosts don't lose. The restaurant was all white linen and overpriced mimosas, the kind of place where brunch was less about food and more about being seen. Denise had picked it herself, of course. It was Marlene's birthday, but Denise was already rehearsing lines in the mirror that morning like she was the guest of honor. She wore her best cream blazer, just tight enough to remind people she still had it, and a pearl pin from her mother's old jewelry box, the irony lost on her completely. The women at the table were the usual suspects, middle-aged power brunchers with expensive skincare routines and even more expensive gossip. Laughter bounced off the marble walls. Glasses clinked. Stories flowed about trips to Aspen, weekend yoga retreats, some new real estate flip that barely broke even but sounded great on Instagram. Then it happened. Right after the second round of drinks, a woman from across the table, Stacy, the one with the too loud laugh and a minor podcast no one listens to, leaned in just a little too casually and said, "Hey, Denise, crazy question. Is it true what they're saying about you suing that STEM foundation?" The table went still just enough for the temperature to drop. Denise blinked. "Excuse me." Stacy shrugged. "Someone brought it up in the group chat. I didn't even know Harold started a nonprofit. That's wild." Denise forced a short laugh. Oh, please. That's not even accurate. It's a technical issue, not a lawsuit. Just a misunderstanding with how he restructured our financials. But her voice wobbled. A younger woman at the end of the table, no more than 30, probably someone's niece, raised her phone and tilted it toward the group. No, it's real. Look. And there it was. The headline glared like a wound. Ex-wife of tech consultant files sued against charity named for her late mother after asset dispute. Subheading: Harold Reynolds' ex-wife, Denise Carter Reynolds, initiates legal action against the Evelyn Carter Foundation, sparking public backlash over perceived attempt to reclaim marital assets through nonprofit channels. The table fell dead silent. Even the waiters, mid-pour, slowed. Denise's face turned porcelain white. I didn't sue a charity, she hissed. It's not that simple. He used the foundation to... To what? Someone asked. Honor your mother? No. He weaponized her name. To humiliate me. But the words sounded hollow. Even to her. Stacy tapped the screen. It says here you tried to freeze the account. That you wanted the funds recalled. It's my money. Denise snapped, too loud. Someone cleared their throat. Denise looked around. Marlene wouldn't meet her eyes. A woman she'd known since PDA days began fiddling with her napkin. Even the niece, bold and blunt as she was, had the good sense to look away. No one said anything for a moment too long. Then Marlene, gentle but brutal, asked, Denise, was that foundation really named after your mom? Denise swallowed hard. Yes. Then maybe. Don't sue it. The words dropped like a brick in a koi pond. Denise felt it, her grip on the table, her breath caught mid-throat, her pulse crawling into her ears. The power she once held in rooms like these, through charisma, control, sheer volume, was gone. It evaporated, leaked out slowly over the past months like gas from a cracked tank. And now? She wasn't the center of attention. She was the cautionary tale. One woman stood to take a phone call. Two others suddenly remembered early appointments. The server slid the check toward Marlene, not Denise, for the first time in years. Denise didn't finish her drink. Didn't say goodbye. She walked out of the restaurant like a woman whose heels weren't high enough to carry the weight anymore. Her reputation, what she'd clung to when the money started slipping, was officially, publicly, humiliatingly shattered. And she still had one more court date left. The final one. The one where Harold had saved the most devastating clause for last. Courtroom 3B wasn't packed, but it felt suffocating. The kind of room that makes every breath taste like paper and old polish. Denise sat at the front table, hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. The same pearl pin she wore to brunch was now stabbed into her blazer like a relic from a war she was still pretending she hadn't already lost. Melissa, her attorney, sat beside her, silent, grim, beaten before the gavel even dropped. Harold sat across the aisle. He wasn't smug, wasn't angry, wasn't even curious. He looked like a man waiting for the DMV to call his number. Calm. Neutral. A man who had already buried the emotions everyone else was still dragging behind them like chains. The judge shuffled papers. No introductions. No drama. Just the slow, inevitable crawl toward the final nail in the coffin. Before we proceed with closing arguments, the judge began. Flipping to the final page of Harold's trust documentation, there is a provision here the court must acknowledge. A clause filed under Section 9, Paragraph 3. He paused, then read aloud, deliberate, steady, without fanfare. In the event of marital separation, all disputed assets default to the premarital holder. The words slid through the room like a scalpel. Then came the silence. Not even the click of a pen. Not even a cough. The judge looked up, adjusted his glasses, and added the sentence that Denise would hear every time she closed her eyes for the rest of her life. This house and all related properties legally belong to Mr. Reynolds. Denise blinked. Once. Twice. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She turned to Melissa, whose face had the same frozen expression of a surgeon realizing the patient on the table was already dead. But I contributed, Denise whispered. We renovated together. We. The judge didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because it wasn't about memories, or effort, or decorative throw pillows. It was about paper. Signed. Filed. Buried. Waiting. Harold stood. Buttoned his jacket with the same slow, respectful motion you'd use at a funeral. Denise looked at him for the first time since the ruling. Really looked at him. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't even meet her eyes. He simply nodded once, then turned and walked out. No last words, no dramatic monologue, no closing speech to drive the knife deeper. He didn't need to raise his voice, because every piece of this collapse had spoken for him. In legal filings, in strategic silences, in quiet plans that didn't scream, they waited. Denise remained seated, still, like if she stayed long enough, maybe someone would rewind the tape and let her try again. But no one did. The judge banged the gavel. The clerk called the next case. And the woman who once ran rooms with her presence now sat, utterly alone, in a courtroom that had already moved on. Because revenge doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it arrives wearing silence and a suit that fits perfectly.